At Christmas dinner, I overheard my parents planning to move my sister's family into my $350,000 condo for free. I smiled and stayed quiet. I let them pack and brag, then I sold it and vanished. 78 missed calls. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Also, Happy New Year. As we step into 2026, I'd love to know, how do you wish each other a Happy New Year in your culture? If you enjoy these stories, please support the channel so we can keep this community growing. The voices coming through the oak door were muffled by the relentless Seattle rain, but the intent was crystal clear. I stood on the welcome mat of my parents' cramped, humid house, my coat heavy with water, listening to the destruction of my life being planned over pot roast. Morgan makes 6 figures, my brother-in-law Blake was saying, his voice carrying that familiar edge of unearned confidence. She doesn't need a 2,000-square-foot loft just for herself. I froze, my hand hovering over the brass knocker. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see them huddled around the dining table like generals mapping out an invasion. My younger sister, Sabrina, was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, playing the role she had perfected since childhood, the fragile victim. My parents, Richard and Susan, were nodding in sympathetic unison. But what if she says no? She won't get the chance. That was my father, Richard. The man who had taught me that loyalty was a one-way street paved with my paycheck. Once you're inside and get mail delivered there, you establish residency, squatter's rights. She'd have to go through a formal eviction. In this city, that takes 6 months minimum. My mother, Susan, let out a sharp, pleased laugh. And she's going on that deployment to Tokyo in January. 3 full months. We'll have the nursery painted and the locks changed before she even lands. My own parents plotting a hostile takeover of my sanctuary, the historic loft I had restored brick by brick, the space that was the only physical manifestation of 15 years of 70-hour work weeks as a strategic risk analyst. They weren't just planning to borrow it. They were planning to steal it. I took a breath. I didn't feel the heat of anger. I felt the cold clarity of a spreadsheet balancing out. They had forgotten who I was. I don't get mad. I assess risk, and I eliminate liabilities. I steadied my hands, arranged my features into a mask of holiday warmth, and pushed the door open. "Merry Christmas," I said, stepping into the trap they thought they were setting for me. The silence in the room wasn't just quiet. It was heavy, like the air before a lightning strike. 4 guilty faces snapped toward me. For a microsecond, I saw the raw, unfiltered panic of conspirators caught with the blueprints to the bank vault. Then, with a speed that was almost impressive, the mask slid back into place. "Morgan! Sweetheart!" My mother, Susan, rushed forward, wiping her hands on her apron, her expression transforming from conspiratorial malice to maternal warmth in the blink of an eye. "We didn't expect you until at least 7. The traffic must have been awful." I let her hug me. It felt like hugging a pillowcase, filled with stones, lumpy, stiff, and uncomfortable. The house smelled of pot roast and damp wool, a stifling, humid scent that clung to the back of my throat. It was a stark contrast to my loft, my glass sanctuary, where the air was always filtered, cool, and smelled faintly of cedar and rain. Here, the walls felt like they were closing in, plastered with photos of Sabrina at prom, Sabrina graduating from the college I paid for, Sabrina's wedding. I was absent from the walls, just as I was absent from their considerations as a human being. I caught an earlier flight. I lied smoothly. I couldn't wait to see the family. My father, Richard, cleared his throat, stepping away from the table where they had just been plotting my financial demise. He looked at me with the wary appraisal of a man who knows he owes money to a loan shark. "Good to see you, Morgan. You're looking successful. Strategic risk pays well, Dad," I said, my voice even. I looked past him to the couch where my sister sat. Sabrina was nesting in a pile of blankets, her hand resting protectively over her baby bump. She looked up at me with wide, watery eyes, playing the fragile mother card with Oscar-worthy commitment. Beside her, Blake, my brother-in-law, leaned back with a beer in his hand, a beer he certainly hadn't paid for, and offered me a smirk that bordered on insolence. He was the idea man, the entrepreneur who had burned through 3 startups and $40,000 of my money, yet still looked at me like I was the one who didn't understand how the world worked. I walked further into the room, setting my wet coat on the rack. My internal risk assessment software was running in the background, tagging hazards. Hostile environment. Multiple bad actors. Leverage ratio, 0. I watched them scramble to clear the table, moving papers that looked suspiciously like floor plans. They were so clumsy, so transparent, and as I watched my mother fuss over Sabrina, bringing her a footstool, ignoring the fact that I was standing there dripping wet, the realization hit me with the cold precision of a scalpel. They didn't see a person standing in their living room. They saw a resource. A natural deposit of cash and real estate to be mined until depletion. For years, I had categorized their behavior as demanding or needy. I had rationalized it as the cost of being the capable one, but looking at them now, I saw the trap of normalizing cruelty. They had conditioned me since childhood to believe that my value lay solely in my utility. My success wasn't my achievement to be celebrated, it was a communal asset they hadn't liquidated yet. I wasn't their daughter or their sister. I was their retirement plan, their safety net, and their housing authority. And you don't ask a resource for permission. You just take it. Sit down. Morgan, my mother said, gesturing to the hard wooden chair at the edge of the room, leaving the comfortable spots for the family. We have so much to talk about, especially with your big trip coming up. I sat. I crossed my legs. I let a small, pleasant smile touch my lips. Yes, I said. We certainly do. So, Morgan, my father began, leaning forward with the gravity of a man about to ask for a kidney. We've been doing some thinking. About the baby. About logistics. I knew the pitch before he opened his mouth. I had heard variations of it for a decade. It was always the same song, just a different verse. As he droned on about Sabrina's high-risk status and the need for a stress-free environment, my mind drifted away from the damp living room and opened the mental ledger I kept locked in the back of my brain. It was a thick, heavy book, filled with red ink. Exhibit A. Blake's disruptive tech startup, 3 years ago. He needed $15,000 for seed capital. I wrote the check because family supports dreams. The startup folded in 4 months. The money vanished into networking dinners and a lease on a sports car. Return on investment, 0. Exhibit B. My father's pension gap. $8,000 to cover union dues and unexpected medical bills. I paid it without asking for a receipt. Later, I saw photos of them on a cruise to Cabo. Sunk cost. Exhibit C. Sabrina's emergency credit card consolidation. $12,000 to save her credit score so she could buy a house. She didn't buy the house. She bought a purebred doodle and a wardrobe refresh. I wasn't a sister. I was a subscription service they had forgotten they were paying for, mostly because they weren't paying. I was the financial spine of this family. And tonight, they weren't asking for a chiropractic adjustment. They were asking to harvest the marrow. And since you'll be in Tokyo for 3 months, my mother was saying, her voice pitching up into that hopeful, wheedling tone, your beautiful loft will just be sitting there, empty, gathering dust. Ideally, Sabrina added, clutching a throw pillow like a shield, we would just need it until the baby comes. Just to get settled. The stairs here. They're so hard on my hips. I looked at them. Really looked at them. They weren't asking. This was a demand dressed up as a favor. They were banking on my conditioning. They were betting the house, my house, that I was too polite, too desperate for their approval to say no. In the past, I would have argued. I would have explained that my home office contained proprietary data servers that couldn't be moved. I would have mentioned the liability insurance. I would have fought, and they would have worn me down with guilt until I wrote a check for a hotel just to make it stop. But I wasn't playing defense anymore. I took a slow sip of the water I'd been offered in a chipped mug. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable, watching Blake fidget and my father crack his knuckles. You know, I said, my voice soft, thoughtful. The shock in the room was palpable. Sabrina stopped sniffing. My mother froze. I hadn't thought about the stairs, I continued, lying with the ease of a sociopath. And the loft is serene. It would be perfect for a nursery. The natural light is very calming. Exactly, Susan clapped her hands together. Oh, Morgan, I knew you'd understand. Family takes care of family. I can leave the keys under the mat on the 28th, I said. I fly out early the next morning. You can have the run of the place. We'll take good care of it, Blake said, puffing his chest out. Already mentally measuring my walls for his posters. Don't you worry about a thing. I won't, I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out the bottle of vintage Barolo. I had brought a $300 bottle of wine that was meant to be a peace offering, now repurposed as a sedative. I handed it to my father. Open this, Dad, I said. He took the bottle, examining the label with the performative appreciation of a man who thinks price equals taste. Exceptional, Morgan. You didn't have to. I wanted to. As he poured the wine and they raised their glasses to toast my generosity, to toast their victory over the resource, I felt a profound, icy detachment. They were drinking to their new home. I was drinking to the demolition. They thought they had just secured a luxury asset. They didn't realize they had just signed a contract with consequences they couldn't afford. I left my parents' house an hour later, pleading exhaustion from the trip. The moment the heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, the suffocating humidity of their home was replaced by the crisp, wet air of a Seattle winter night. I didn't get into my car immediately. I stood on the sidewalk, letting the rain wash away the feeling of their performative gratitude. When I got back to my loft, my sanctuary, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked straight to my server rack in the home office, the room they were already mentally painting pastel yellow, and pulled up the security feeds. I needed to be sure. I needed one final piece of evidence to silence the tiny, residual voice of the dutiful daughter that still whispered in the back of my mind. I scrolled back 48 hours. The timestamp read December 22nd, 2:14 p.m. The feed showed my front door swinging open. My father walked in first, looking over his shoulder like a burglar. Though he moved with the arrogance of ownership, he held a key, a spare I had never given him. He must have swiped it from my bag during Thanksgiving while I was doing the dishes. Behind him waddled Blake, holding a tape measure. It's bigger than I thought, Blake's voice came through the audio, tinny but clear. He walked into the center of my living room, scuffing his boots on my restored hardwood floors. We could fit a 70-inch screen on that wall easily. Focus, Blake, my father said, walking straight to my office. He pushed the door open and stared at my workspace, my dual monitors, my ergonomic chair, the framed certifications on the exposed brick wall. He didn't see a career. He saw square footage. This is it, Richard said. This is the nursery. The brick is kinda ugly, Blake commented, tapping the wall. Too industrial. Sabrina wants something softer. Maybe we can drywall over it? Or just paint it white? Paint over the original 1920s brick, the brick I had spent 3 weeks restoring by hand with a toothbrush and specialized cleaner, the brick that represented the history and integrity of the building. Paint it. Richard agreed casually. Morgan won't notice. She's never here anyway. By the time she gets back from Tokyo, she'll get used to it. She always adjusts. She always adjusts. That was it. That was the epitaph for our relationship. They weren't just planning to use my space. They were planning to erase me from it. They were banking on my infinite capacity to absorb their disrespect. I closed the laptop. The green light of the screen faded, plunging the room into darkness. The violation was absolute. It wasn't just trespassing. It was a fundamental rejection of my personhood. I picked up my phone and dialed Julian. It was almost 10 p.m. But venture capitalists don't sleep, especially not the ones who hunt opportunities for sport. Morgan, his voice was smooth, surprised. This is late for a risk assessment. I have a proposition, Julian. You still interested in the Pioneer Square loft? There was a pause on the line, a heavy, pregnant silence. You're selling? I thought that place was your soul. It was, I said, my voice steady, devoid of emotion. Now, it's a liability. I need to liquidate. 360,000. Cash. That's 60 under market. I heard the sound of a chair shifting, the rustle of movement. I had his full attention. What's the catch? 2 conditions, I said. First, we close in 48 hours. Second, I need an immediate gut renovation. I want the demolition crew there at 10 a.m. On December 28th. I want the walls down, the floors ripped up, the plumbing exposed. I want it uninhabitable by lunch. You want me to destroy a historic restoration? I want you to remodel, I corrected. I know you've always hated the layout. Make it open concept. Make it yours. Just start the demo on the 28th. Someone hurt you, Julian said, not asking. Someone underestimated me, I replied. Do we have a deal? Send the contract, he said. I'll wire the deposit tonight. I hung up. I looked around the shadowed loft, tracing the lines of the brick I had loved, the floors I had polished. It was just a building now. A shell. The sanctuary was gone the moment they walked in uninvited. Now, it was just collateral damage. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in asset liquidation. I didn't pack like someone moving out. I packed like someone sanitizing a crime scene. My proprietary servers, the art I had collected from local galleries, the hand-woven rugs, everything that held actual value was moved into a climate-controlled storage unit under an LLC my father would never find. By noon on the 26th, the loft was a hollow shell. The echo of my footsteps on the hardwood was the only sound left, but I wasn't leaving them an empty apartment. That would be too suspicious. They expected a fully furnished luxury suite, and I was going to give them a theater set. I went to the Goodwill outlet on the edge of town, the one where they sell furniture by the pound. I bought a sofa that smelled of wet dog and cigarette smoke, with a spring that threatened to impale anyone who sat on the middle cushion. I found a dining table with one leg shorter than the others, guaranteed to spill drinks. I bought mattresses that felt like bags of gravel and sheets that had the texture of sandpaper. I staged the loft with the precision of a set designer building a slum. I put the scratching post right where Blake wanted his 70-inch screen. I replaced the high-end Italian espresso machine with a drip coffee maker that leaked. It looked habitable from a distance, but the moment you touched anything, the illusion crumbled. It was a physical manifestation of our relationship. A facade of comfort, masking absolute decay. Then came the coup de grace. The Trojan horse. I went into the walk-in closet in the master bedroom, the room Sabrina had already claimed for herself, and stacked 4 large boxes on the shelf. I wrapped them in festive gold paper and attached elegant name tags. Dad, Mom, Sabrina, Blake. They would assume these were housewarming gifts. High thread count sheets, maybe. Or baby gear. They would tear into them with the greedy entitlement that defined them. But inside those boxes wasn't a single item of value. Inside Richard's box were 5 years of receipts for his union dues bills I had been auto-paying since his pension glitch in 2019. Alongside them was a notice of payment cancellation, effective immediately. Inside Susan's box were the statements for the department store credit card she thought had a limitless limit. It didn't. It had me paying the minimum balance every month to keep the collections agents away. I included the number for the debt consolidation service I had just fired on her behalf. Inside Blake's box were the loan documents for his failed crypto mining rig. He thought the loan had been forgiven. It hadn't. I had bought the debt to keep him out of court. Now, I was transferring the liability back to him. And for Sabrina? Her box contained the cancellation notice for her health insurance premium, the gold tier plan she insisted she needed for the baby, which I had been covering because her husband was between opportunities. I wasn't just evicting them from my home. I was evicting them from my payroll. For years, I had been the invisible dam holding back the floodwaters of their own financial incompetence. Today, I was blowing the dam. I placed the final bow on Sabrina's box. It looked beautiful. I walked to the kitchen counter and wrote a note on my personalized stationery. Welcome home. Make yourselves comfortable. You've earned everything that's coming to you. I placed the keys under the welcome mat, the only promise I actually kept. Then I walked out into the rain, got into my car, and drove to the airport. I didn't look back at the building. It wasn't my sanctuary anymore. It was just a blast zone waiting for the timer to hit 0. December 28th. 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I was sitting in the first-class lounge at SeaTac, sipping a mimosa that cost more than Blake's monthly contribution to society. My laptop was open, streaming the final act of my family drama in high-definition 4K. The feed showed my living room. They had moved in the night before, just as I predicted. The place looked like a college dorm room after a frat party. Pizza boxes were stacked on my antique scratched table. Blake was asleep on the dog-smelling sofa, drooling onto a cushion that had likely been used as a chew toy. Sabrina waddled into the frame, holding her lower back. "This mattress is awful," she complained, her voice tinny through the speakers. "I think it has lumps. Morgan must have kept the good stuff in storage." "We'll buy new ones," Susan said, entering from the kitchen with a mug of coffee. "Once we sell some of this junk." I can't believe she lived like this. No wonder she's single. I took a slow sip of champagne. "Enjoy it, Mother. It's the last time you'll feel superior." At 10:02 a.m., the front door didn't just open. It was unlocked by a key I had given to Julian's head of security. The door swung wide, revealing 3 men in dark suits and a crew of 6 construction workers in hard hats, carrying sledgehammers and crowbars. My family froze. Blake scrambled up from the couch, wiping drool from his chin. "Who the hell are you?" The man in the lead suit stepped forward. "I'm Marcus Stone, head of security for Apex Development. You are trespassing on an active construction site." "Trespassing?" Richard laughed, that arrogant attorney laugh he used to intimidate waitresses. "My daughter owns this loft. We have her permission." "Morgan King sold this property on December 26th, Stone said, his voice a flat, unyielding baritone. "The new owner has ordered an immediate gut renovation. Demo starts now." He signaled the crew. The first sledgehammer hit the drywall with a sound like a gunshot. Crack! Dust plumed into the air. "Stop!" Sabrina screamed, clutching her belly. "I'm pregnant. You can't do this." "You have 5 minutes to vacate," Stone said, checking his watch. "After that, anything left inside becomes debris." "I'm calling the police." Richard pulled out his phone, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "This is an illegal eviction. You have to give 30 days' notice." "There is no lease," Stone countered calmly. "There is no tenancy agreement. You are squatters in a commercial development zone. And the police are already on their way to remove you." Another hammer smashed into the kitchen island. Crash. Watching on my screen, I felt a strange, clinical fascination. It wasn't just satisfying, it was educational. I was witnessing a psychological phenomenon in real time. The narcissistic injury. They weren't screaming because they were homeless. They were screaming because their reality was fracturing. They had built their entire worldview on the premise that I existed to serve them, that my resources were their birthright. By selling the loft, I hadn't just taken away a roof. I had taken away their control. The extinction burst had begun. "Where is she?" Susan shrieked, grabbing Stone by the lapel. "Where is my daughter? She wouldn't do this. She loves us." "She sold the property, ma'am," Stone said, removing her hand with professional disdain. "She's gone." "Look at this," Blake yelled, holding up one of the gold-wrapped boxes I'd left in the closet. He must have found them while looking for a place to hide. "She left us gifts. She wants us here." He tore open the box labeled Blake. He pulled out the papers. I watched his face change. Confusion. Then realization. Then pure, unadulterated horror. It's a bill," he whispered. "It's the loan." She stopped paying the loan. Richard tore open his box. Susan grabbed hers. The sound of tearing paper mixed with the rhythmic thud, thud, thud of the demolition crew taking down the north wall. She canceled the credit card, Susan gasped, staring at the statement. The minimum payment. It's $4,000. My insurance. Sabrina wailed, holding up her notice. I don't have a doctor anymore. It was chaos. It was a symphony of consequences crashing down on people who had never felt a raindrop of accountability in their lives. The walls were literally coming down around them, exposing the rot of their entitlement. Out, Stone barked. Now, I watched them scramble. They didn't grab their clothes. They grabbed the boxes of bills, as if holding onto the paper would somehow make the money reappear. They ran out into the hallway. A pathetic parade of failures, chased by the dust of my former life. As the camera feed cut to black, the power finally severed by the crew, I felt the tension leave my shoulders. It was done. The parasite had realized the host was dead. And the host was already boarding a flight to Tokyo, 6 months later. Kyoto. The rain here falls differently than it does in Seattle. It's gentler, rhythmic, a sound that cleanses rather than suffocates. I sat on the engawa of my rented machiya, a traditional wooden townhouse that smelled of tatami mats and aged cedar. My laptop was closed, my phone was on silent. A courier had delivered the letter an hour ago. It was hand-addressed in a frantic, scrawling script I recognized instantly. Sabrina. I hadn't opened it immediately. I had finished my tea first. I had watched a koi fish navigate the stone pond in the garden. Only then, with a sense of detached curiosity, did I slide a letter opener under the flap. Morgan. Mom says we aren't supposed to write. Dad says you're dead to us. Blake says you're a sociopath. But I need you to know what you did. We were evicted from Blake's mother's basement 3 months ago. She found out about the debt, the loans you stopped paying. She checked her own credit and found out Blake had used her name too. She threw us out. We're staying in a motel off the highway. The boys are sleeping on the floor. I tried to use the health insurance for a prenatal checkup, and they laughed at me. Cancelled. Everything is cancelled. Mom had to go back to work. Retail. She stands on her feet for 8 hours a day. She cries every night. Dad's pension is being garnished to pay the back taxes you used to cover. Everyone knows. Morgan, the church, the neighbors. Someone posted the video of the eviction. We can't show our faces anywhere. I'm not asking for money. I know you won't give it. I just wanted you to know that you won. You destroyed us. Are you happy now? I read the letter twice. In the past, these words would have been daggers. They would have triggered a landslide of guilt. I would have been on the phone to a realtor, arranging a safe house for them. I would have wired cash to fix the mess I hadn't made. But today, I felt nothing. It wasn't hatred. Hatred takes energy. Hatred is an active connection. This was something far more permanent. It was the quiet quit of the soul. I realized then that I hadn't just sold a condo. I had retired. I had submitted my resignation from the job of being their daughter. I had laid off the role of savior. The position was vacant, and I wasn't accepting applications for rehire. I folded the letter carefully. I didn't burn it. That would be too dramatic. I simply placed it in the recycling bin next to yesterday's newspapers. There was one loose end, though, the innocent. I opened my laptop and sent a secure message to my lawyer in Seattle. Status of the trusts? The reply came instantly. Executed. Irrevocable. Education and living expenses for the nephews. Accessible at age 18. Trustees appointed. Parents have no access and no knowledge. I closed the laptop. My nephews would have a future. They would have the start I never got. But their parents? My parents? They had made their choices. They had bet their survival on my compliance, and the market had crashed. I looked out at the garden. My new sanctuary wasn't made of brick and glass. It wasn't a location I could be evicted from. It was this silence. It was the peace of knowing that my resources were finally, irrevocably, my own. They tried to take my sanctuary. So I gave them the only thing they truly earned. Consequences. Share this if you've ever had to fire your own family to save your peace.